There are a number of tools and features in Photoshop that apply color. Everything from the brush tool, to the type tool, to the shape tool, to the fill command under the edit menu, and more. The primary color that most of those use is stored down here at the bottom of the Tools panel, in this box, the Foreground Color box. There are a number of different ways to set the foreground color, which we'll be looking at later in this tutorial. For now, let's use a simple way, the Eyedropper Tool, which is located here in the Tools panel. I'll select that tool, and then I'll move into the image and I'll click on a color, like this orange, and that sets the foreground color to orange. So now if I go to the brush tool, or any other tool that applies color, and I use that tool, it makes use of that foreground color. There's a background color box too. Mine happens to be white at the moment. That comes into play less often than the foreground color. For example, the background color is used as a secondary color for the gradient tool, a tool that lets you draw a gradual blend of color from the foreground to the background color. Another use of the background color is just to have another color handy so you can quickly switch to another color when you're doing something like painting. To switch between the foreground and background colors, click the double-pointed bent arrow just above the color boxes. Now I'll go back to the Eyedropper tool and I'll click on another color in the image. And that sets the new foreground color. So now I have red as my foreground color and orange as my background color. As I said, I can quickly switch between these two colors either by pressing these double-pointed arrows or using the keyboard shortcut X. Black and white are the default colors. If you ever need to get back to those colors quickly, press D on your keyboard. And the foreground color is now black and the background color white. So that's an introduction to where to store and access colors as you're working with the color tools. Stay tuned for the next video where we'll explore alternative ways to choose colors in Photoshop. Photoshop has a number of different ways to select color, which we'll take a look at in this video. If you're following along, you can use this image from the practice files for this tutorial, or you can use an image of your own. The most full-featured way to select a color is the color picker. To open the color picker, go down to the foreground color box at the bottom of the Tools panel and click there, and the color picker opens, giving you choices for the foreground color. A good place to start in the color picker is with this slider, which by default shows you different hues of color. I'll click and drag this slider to get to the hue I'm interested in, this light blue hue. But hue isn't the only property of color. Saturation and brightness are two other properties, and they're represented here in this large box. So, for example, if I want a dark, desaturated blue, I'll come down to the dark area and over to the left for the desaturated shades of blue, and then I'll click to select a color. Or if I want a bright, very saturated shade of blue, I'll come up here for bright and over to the right for saturated. The color that I choose appears in this square in the New area. The bottom of this square represents the last color that was selected. When I have a color I'm happy with, I'll click OK. And that color appears in the foreground color box at the bottom of the Tools panel. And if I'm working with a tool like the brush tool that applies color, that's the color that it will use. The color picker isn't the only place to go to choose color. We've already seen the Eyedropper tool, which you can use to select a color by clicking on it in an image, and this is very useful when you need to match a color to the colors already in an image. There are also two panels over on the right that you can use to choose color, the Swatches panel and the Color panel. If these aren't open, you can open them from the Window menu at the top of the screen. We've been using the Swatches panel throughout this series of tutorials because they're easy to access. The Swatches panel contains preset chips of color. To set a foreground color, all you have to do is click on one of these chips, and it appears down here in the foreground color box. The color chips that you've used most recently appear here at the top of the Swatches panel for easy access. I'm going to click on the Color tab to see the Color panel. The Color panel is a lot like the color picker. Over on the right, it has a color slider that you can use to choose a hue. And then it has a large field where you can choose a shade of that hue according to its brightness from top to bottom and its saturation from right to left. If I select a color here, it appears here in a replica of the foreground color box, and if I go down to the bottom of the Tools panel, I'll find that same color there. And then I can use it with any of my tools, like the brush tool. So that's an overview of the various places to select colors in Photoshop. You're welcome to use whichever of those methods is most convenient and most comfortable for you. By the way, if you don't want to save this image, you're welcome to close it without saving by going up to the File menu and choosing Close. Or you can just click the X here on the Document tab. When you add text to an image in Photoshop, it automatically appears on a special kind of layer called a type layer. Text on a type layer remains editable, so that you can always change its content or its appearance. And it has smooth edges when printed, even if you make the text a lot bigger. In this video, we'll practice adding text to an image. You can use this image from the downloadable practice files for this tutorial, or an image of your own. The tool you'll use most often to create text is the horizontal type tool. You can select it here in the Tools panel. Then go up to the Options bar and click on the Font menu. Here you'll see a list of fonts that you can scroll through to choose one you like. The list shows you a preview of what each font looks like. Or if you know the font that you want, you can just type it here in the font field. I'll type Georgia. And Photoshop shows you all available styles of that font. I'll choose Georgia Bold. If you don't have this font, choose a font of your own. Next, let's set the font size. This menu shows you the font size in points by default. By the way, the default size is very small on a large image like this. If you ever enter type and you can't see it, that's probably why. So just try again with a larger font size. Here you can type in a font size if you know it, or you can click this arrow and choose a font size from the drop-down menu. I'll choose a large font size. Let's use white for the text we're going to enter. To set the font color, go up to the Options bar and click the Font Color field. That opens the color picker, which we covered in an earlier tutorial in this series. To select white here, go to the large field on the left and click on white, and then click OK. If you want to type uppercase letters, as I do, press the caps lock key on your keyboard. Then click in the image and start typing. I'm going to type the name of a fictional tailor business. You can type any name you like. After you enter or edit text, you always have to accept it. One way to do that is to go up to the Options bar and click the big check mark there. If the text isn't where you want it, then go to the Tools panel and select the Move tool. Click in the image and drag the text where you want it. Now take a look at the Layers panel. You'll see that Photoshop has created a new layer for you, and it's even named it for you. The T icon on the layer indicates that this is a special re-editable type layer. Now let's say you want another type layer. Using multiple type layers will let you work with and position each one separately, just like regular layers. So let's go back to the Tools panel and select the horizontal type tool again. Then move into the image and hold down the Shift key as you click to start a new type layer. That assures that the new text will end up on its own layer rather than tacked on to the end of the first layer, which can happen if you start making one type layer too close to another. Let's choose some different options for this type layer. I'll go up to the Font menu, and this time I'm going to choose a different font and a smaller font size. And then I'll start typing. You can type what you like. At the end of the first line, I'm going to press the Return or the Enter key on the keyboard to add another line of type on the same type layer. When you're finished typing, go up to the Options bar and click the big check mark. As long as you still have the type layer selected in the Layers panel, and you still have the horizontal type tool selected in the Tools panel, you can change the options for this type layer. For example, If I want the two lines of type on this layer to be center aligned, here in the Options bar, I'll click the Center Align icon. Then select the Move tool in the Tools panel and click on the new text and drag it where you want it. And now there's another type layer over in the Layers panel. When you're finished, go to the File menu and choose Save As. In the Save As dialog box, it's important to save in the Photoshop format and to leave Layers checked in order to retain your editable type layers in this working version of the file. If you need a copy to share, you can save another copy as a JPEG, but the JPEG won't retain your type layers. So those are the basics of creating text. Stay tuned for the next video where we'll see how to edit text.